So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third day of the conference. It is a pleasure for me to be moderator of today's first panel on the joint measures to foster circular migration and return migration. My name is Daniel Göler. I'm professor for Geographic, Migration and Transition Studies at the University of Bamberg in Germany. I'm doing research on economic, social, and urban geographies of Eastern and Southeastern Europe with a special focus on Russian Federation and the Western Balkan countries. Migration is one of my main fields of interest there. Let me explain the panel's agenda for today. Firstly, I will briefly introduce the topic and the panelists. Then we will have a first round with statements from the panel of approximately 5 minutes maximum, followed by comments by the audience and again, reactions from the panel. This will be flanked by an instant online survey. The results of this survey will serve as the basis for a third last round of discussion. Everything in 90 minutes, which will be very, very challenging for all of us. For introduction, I would like the colleagues to start with a video which is prepared by Deutsche Welle. Please.
This is something I brought from my apartment in Berlin because in Serbia people differently prepare coffee than I got used there. So this is basically part of my ritual every day, and also it reminds me of a very good time in Berlin. To me, it always seemed pretty unfair to just sit in my apartment and watch news on the computer and not being actually part of the everyday work and trying to, do my best as a journalist in this country to try to change things and actually to just maybe simply ask questions I was interested in back then in Berlin, sitting in front of the computer. So that's the main reason why I decided to come back and to work here as a journalist, even though I know this is not the safest and the best job you can have at this moment in this country. I don't see right now that things can change that rapidly in order to for me to stay, but what I'm hoping to see is that kind of to be a part of the change, to be here, to try to be present in this country when change comes, because I think that's what every journalist is striving for, to be part of the change and to be at the right place at the right moment.
So, from a scientific perspective, this video reminds me strongly on elements of the so-called migration development nexus or the migration knowledge nexus. This concept describes when deficits of emigration, the brain drain, turns into benefits by gaining positive effects by return, mainly in economic terms, but it includes also effects on politics, on governance, on civil society, on culture, or maybe on some kind of idealism. Philip said, I want to be part of the change, that's why I returned to Serbia. Generally, there are two interpretations of this concept. In an optimistic view, emigrants maintain often strong connections to the countries of origin, to the regions they left, and give support by remittances. So optimism is, in the long run, connected to the expectation that migrants will come back sooner or later. In the pessimistic view, we have to take into account lots of constraints for returnees on the labor market. We heard about that yesterday, in wage gaps, in education, in the social system. Nothing to say about the dependency, the possibly dependency of families on remittances. The question arising is more or less the question for the whole conference, how to turn these constraints into potentials. That's the reason why we invited 5 distinguished experts on that topic. Let me briefly introduce Monika Roman. She is full professor at the Department of Statistics and Econometrics at Bucharest University of Economics. Since 2011, she is affiliated as research fellow at the Institute of Labor Economics in Bonn and at the Central European Labor Studies Institute in Bratislava. Jelena Predojević-Despić is PhD and research associate at the Institute of Social Science at Belgrade University. Her expertise includes the link between migration issues, demography, labor market, and human capital. Her current research focus, among others, on migration and transnational entrepreneurship. Alida Vračić holds a Master of Science in International Public Policy from the University College of London. She is co-founder and the executive directress of Populari, a Bosnia-based think tank specialized in the European integration of the Western Balkans regions. Currently, she is Europe's Future Fellow at the Institute for Human Science in Vienna and a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Samir Beharić is well known from Wednesday afternoon session. He is member of the board of the Western Balkans Alumni Association, and he recently graduated at the University of Vienna and Leipzig University. He conducted his master thesis research on the influence of foreign scholarship programs on brain circulation. Birgit Glorius, last but not least, is full professor for human geography with a special focus on European migration at the Technical University of Chemnitz. Her research interests and a majority of publications are in the fields of international migration, demographic change, geographies of education. She has research experience in Eastern Germany, Poland, Bulgaria, and the Western Balkan countries. So let me open the first round on the panel with a question to Birgit. Birgit, you analyzed circular migration of students between Eastern and Western Europe with a special focus on knowledge transfer and the question of the knowledge development nexus. Recently, you finalized a research project on return migration of Bulgarian students who graduated abroad. Please give us a short insight into the results of this study, and maybe you can draw some conclusions from that study, which was done in a European Union country for the Western Balkan countries. Please.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, and good morning to everybody. I will briefly talk about this Finnish project where we were interested in migration biographies of young Bulgarians who decided to study abroad. Most of them who we did interviews with studied in Germany, but there were also people who went to UK, to Norway, or to the United States. And we were interested how those young people take the decision to either stay in the country of emigration after graduation and enter the labor market there, given that they already are very well socialized with those host countries, or if they take the decision to return to their country of origin in the context of wage differences between Bulgaria and Western European countries. This would be a step against economic rationality, if you look at it from migration theory. So you would always estimate that people rather stay abroad. How did we do this research? We selected 30 interviewees in Bulgaria who returned, and 30 persons in Germany who graduated there a while ago and had taken the decision to stay in Germany. It was a qualitative research. We did biographical interviews, as we assumed that those young people's migration decisions are very much connected with life stage decisions. Just very briefly, a couple of findings, and I will concentrate on the returnees whom we interviewed. So what were the main reasons to return? Some of them just returned because they had planned to return after graduation, but in fact it was not that easy to determine this, because often it was more complex why they returned. Social life was a strong reason to return, so the wish to reunite with families, with friends, to enjoy the climate, the food of the home country, and so on. They did not return for economic goals, but I would say there was a part of returnees who said they returned because they thought it would be good for their career development. And there was one interviewee who said, well, I have the impression the people who return are those who want to grow. So really anticipating that the situation in the country of return is not easy, it's a challenge, but as we just saw in this little video, really the motive to make something beneficial for the country, to bring back knowledge to the country, and at the same time to grow, because you might have in this transition situation, you might have better opportunities to develop something on your own than in Germany or in another Western European country where everything is well settled already. So what does this mean for the migration development nexus? I will draw 3 very short conclusions. We saw that a beneficial return needs preparation. So people who just return spontaneously experienced some struggles and also had some learning time until they really were satisfied with their labor market integration and career, and they reflected on that and said, well, it would have been better to prepare. How can you prepare? How did they prepare, those who did? They prepared mostly by engaging in transnational networks of people who did the same, like of former returnees who shared their experiences. Interestingly, we did not find any connection to state programs, like return programs by the Bulgarian state or support programs. It was all done by returnees in terms of NGO work or institutionalized networks. Regarding those networks, we found that also those who are staying abroad can contribute to the home country, because they engage in those networks, and especially those who were self-employed really found opportunities to do business interactions with Bulgaria, especially in the new social media market. And the third conclusion was regarding the reflections of the stayers in comparison with the returnees, that there's a mismatch between the realities in the country of return and the opportunities we have there, and the expectations of people, meaning that stayers mostly saw much bigger obstacles regarding a return than was reflected by returnees. And that's a point where I think state programs or any kind of support institutions could step in and just give more transparency about the realities at home, about opportunities, and can really facilitate the way back and the way how to become beneficial for the country of return. Thank you.
Thank you for your input and keeping the time perfectly. Thank you. So let's ask or include Monika Roman. Monika, you are a team leader in the project Empowerment Through Liquid Integration of Migrant Youth in Vulnerable Conditions. I know the concept of liquid migration, but not the concept of liquid integration. So please explain that, and maybe is it a new approach to foster return or circular migration? Monika, please.
Thank you. So our project empowerment through liquid integration of migrant youth in vulnerable conditions is one of the many projects financed by the European Union and devoted to analyzing the path and the practices, best practices that would lead to empowering young in vulnerable conditions in their integration process. Actually, this would be my second project of this kind in which I'm involved in. And for now, the project just started in 2020, and we are able to report some very initial results using macro statistical data. But before going into results, I would like to suggest a bit or to answer Professor Göler's questions related to the concepts. Basically, migration, as we all know, is extremely diverse recently, and young migrants are the ones facing various types of migrations in regarding the length of migration and the type of the process. So liquid migration, as you already mentioned, was introduced in 2012 by Engberson, and the concept is very much related to various migration types. Migration is no longer regarded as being linear or only circular, but it may also be in various shapes. So people are oscillating between geographical locations. They migrate in circles to one place, from one place to another place, and from there to a third place. And then they may return to their home country. So having this diversity of migration, circular migration may now be regarded as one particular form of these new shapes migration may take. In this context, of course, integration may be or should be also looked at in a more larger sense. And the concept of liquid integration actually tries to focus on the complexity of migration process. So individuals should respond and should adjust to the constant transformation of various institutions they meet in various countries. And this adjustment process may also affect the integration. So both at individual and structural level, integration process must be understood as being non-linear and unpredictable. In this context, young individuals, young migrants, a fascinating topic widely discussed yesterday. So young migrants are the most vulnerable group as they are the most mobile group. So yeah, I hope I bring some clarification regarding the concepts that are used in our MIMI project. And regarding the initial results, basically the methodology employed in the project is mixed. We are starting with a macroeconomic analysis and from a quantitative perspective, and in parallel we are also conducting various types of interviews, focus group, and so on, for better understanding how vulnerable migrants may be integrated within European Union countries. Initial results show that there is large room for better understanding young migrants, not only by looking at the standard dimensions of integration, such as labor markets integration or social inclusion, but also related to education. There still are significant gaps in terms of education participation or unemployment rates or labor market integrations between young natives and young migrants, mostly when we are referring to migrants coming from third countries.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So let's go on with Jelena Predojević-Despić. Jelena, you addressed, among other topics in your research, transnationalism and transnational entrepreneurship. How far do you see transnationalism as a factor to stimulate return migration of talents, especially young people? Please.
Thank you, Professor Göler. First, I will take this opportunity to thank our hosts for organizing this important conference to better understand the Western Balkans' complex migration processes and to give our countries additional encouragement to developing effective policy measures to mitigate immigration processes. Permanent residence in destination countries is still the dominant form of immigration. However, a significant increase in the transnational migrant activities is also noticeable. This is also the case with the migrants from the Western Balkans, and especially in the last 10 or 15 years. One of the main reasons for the growth is that they are additionally driven by the dynamics of globalization, so they give room to various kind of initiatives. Transnational economic practices can vary also greatly in the scope and in intensity. They involve a wide range of migrants from low-skilled to high-skilled professionals, entrepreneurs, and both in formal and in informal economy. It implies different ways of embeddedness, both in the society of destination and origin, a wide range of processes of adaptation and coping in different social contexts. Thus, transnationalism can influence integration, and it also opens up a new possibility for more efficient ways of connecting diaspora with countries of origin. Overall, the rapid globalization, international businesses, and fast ascending immigration processes promise an upward trend in transnational economic activities and in entrepreneurship. However, we lack comprehensive knowledge on this phenomenon. Therefore, both theoretical and empirical research is required to clearly and thoroughly unveil the different aspects of international activities and their governance, of course. In this sense, I would like to refer shortly to the results of the research on transnational entrepreneurs in Serbia and Albania I was engaged in, and this is one of very few studies on transnationalism in the Western Balkans. Transnational entrepreneurs are reality in the Western Balkans, but till recently, they were unrecognized in the policy scope. As migrant group, they have potential to boost circular migration and create new development options in origin countries through expanding their business operation. This especially stands for opportunity entrepreneurs, but also for necessity entrepreneurs with their micro businesses. They are uniquely positioned between home and destination country and are successful because they are transnational. Also, they carry potential for strengthening cooperation in the Western Balkans and intra-regional migration. And through their ventures, partly they can compensate skill shortages in the region. It is important to say that they simultaneously function as a part of different networks, which help them in overcoming challenging, but also pursuing opportunities. Therefore, we need to gain more knowledge on the dynamics of their social capitals, the challenges they face, and help their business become faster integrated into economies, especially of the origin countries. On the other hand, public policy decision-making should be more proactive and dynamic, which unfortunately is not the case in many domains. It is needed to develop innovative approaches to efficiently manage these alternative migration patterns that can bring development. And as a conclusion, I would like to underline that only countries that invest significantly in the quality of system of education, and Western Balkans countries are of those kind, especially of higher education and of technical staff, could benefit from this type of technology transfer. So for now, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jelena. And we go on with Alida Vračić. Alida, you represent the perspective of political science in our panel. How far is European integration a precondition, a prerequisite for return, or will it, vice versa, stimulate more immigration? Alida, please.
Yes. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, excellent. No, many thanks for this panel and many thanks for this conference. I have to be honest, if I envisaged this 5 years ago, it wouldn't be possible. At the time, I started my research on immigration and circular migration because there seemed to be no interest in the region, but also in the EU capitals to discuss this sort of thing. 5 years on, we're here and we have a 3-day conference discussing immigration, circular migration, and future prospects. So that makes me very happy. As for the EU integration, I think we should have no illusions that EU integration is a quick fix for anything. At its core, the EU is about mobility. So probably we should also observe it that way. People should move around, people emigrate, and this is perfectly normal. If you actually put together all people that are living outside of their residence in the EU, you would have the largest country in the EU of people that are commuting in between, working and operating perfectly well. Now, in the light of what is happening at the moment with COVID-19, I think this is even more important because, as you know, companies are deciding to actually promote work from home or remote work. There are more and more possibilities with digital infrastructure. So I think this is a changing moment. This is a really good moment to discuss all these issues. As we have seen in cases of Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, EU doesn't necessarily stop immigration. On contrary, it might even accelerate the immigration. We have in Croatia, that I have followed closely, thousands of people leaving from 2013 on, doctors, engineers, but also all other people. That means basically that we shouldn't put all our coins into one bucket. At the same time, there is this great incentive of the EU, which is the convergence. We need to promote convergence so people actually feel better at home, not being forced to leave, at least not for the economic reasons if we waive out the rest of it. And this economic convergence simply never happened. It never took place. When we talk about convergence, I'm talking about equal standards or closer to equal standards to the EU capitals at the moment. So 20 plus countries. At the same time, EU is very much invested into the region in a political sense, but also economical sense. And if you look at the trade, if you look at the ratio between the Western Balkans in this concrete sense, but also Southeast Europe and the EU capitals, this is the primary market. And these jobs and these sort of exchanges of mobility should come as really natural. So I think there is a great role that EU can play at this moment, promoting circular migration. And having said that, I don't think we really have to invent that much. I mean, there's hundreds of examples around. I personally have investigated Irish model, but there are other models that we can look upon where they have basically created an environment where people want to return to some extent, but not only Irish people want to return, but there are other people who would like to come to Ireland because of all sorts of incentives that are being created. And we're coming to the bottom line that people will want to live in a country that basically provides, where they have, and this is something that has been discussed yesterday, where they have clean air, where they have prospects of jobs, where they have good schools, where they have quality health system. All these things are part of the larger sort of EU reform. And this is exactly the convergence point that I'm referring to. At the same time, there are things that we can do as of today, because there are hundreds of initiatives being launched already in the 90s that are still existing, where we can basically plug in and try to sort of use the networks and try to use these platforms to connect people. There is also a necessity to harmonize certain things that are on the EU level, or actually in the Western Balkans, but being promoted by the EU. And I'm specifically here referring to the Eurostat. I mean, yesterday we talked a little bit, and with my colleague Tim Judah, I've done some work on it. Data doesn't really doesn't really help because it's all over the place, it's scattered, it's not reliable. So why not putting this in one place? Why not having Eurostat harmonizing methodologies and harmonizing data in a way that we actually can use it as a future policy making tool? So, and then we can go on and on and on. I recently have done some work for the IWM here in Vienna on health workers. This is super important. If you watch the news today, you will see that there is a shortage of doctors and nurses, medical staff in general. This is exactly the point where the EU can basically plug into the system and help ease in a way the situation back in the Balkans if there is a shortage, because as we know, in March and April, countries of the EU basically flown in nurses and doctors from Bulgaria, Romania, and other places in order to be safe with their own medical sectors. Exchange programs, we had talked about education. This is all under EU umbrella. So at its core, being about mobility, being about economic reforms, being about convergence, I think there is a huge role that EU can play in this respect. At the same time, of course, there is a portion of work that has to happen back in the region, and it would take probably 2 days to discuss that particular segment, because I don't think we have done enough. I don't think some countries even started or begun talking about immigration and circular migration in a proper way, but they kind of scratching on the surface still and trying to figure out what are the possible models. But at the same time, you know, it's one of those most important things that I personally think happening in the region, and that we should be discussing, because there are no partners for reforms of the EU if you have no people that are educated and capable of understanding what kind of tasks are actually before us. In that sense, EU will not have really partners to work with if everyone is gone at one point. And one last thing, we kind of lightly use this brain drain kind of expression. More I work on it, more I realize it's wrong, actually. And why I say it's wrong, it's because there is a pressure being created back in the region that those who do not emigrate are actually those, you know, who had no brain to do it. So it's really, we shouldn't use it as lightly. It's an immigration of people, but, you know, we shouldn't put even more pressure onto those that are staying in the region. So we should be somewhat more careful about how we use it. And we should, anyway, not discuss this in an emotional manner, because there's so many benefits immigration brings, especially for the small countries. A country of 3 or 4 or 5 million people can only benefit really from immigration. Last point I want to make, and this is me opening up a new sort of topic that we might discuss or here or not. Countries that are prosperous and countries that are well off in economic sense, but also other culture and other senses, are countries that experience immigration. This is one thing that simply has not come to the agenda whatsoever in the region, at least in the Western Balkans. At the moment, this is a super emotional question that is being often portrayed as a difficult one. But in reality, life is happening. You have in the region now kids that are 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade that are speaking probably better Serbian, Bosnian, Croatian than Arabic. This is life. And this is happening. And I think we should be discussing it also in an informed way and in a sort of a policy-oriented way, but we should definitely start off discussing this particular issue. So I'm going to end up here.
Yes, thank you, Alida. I think we should do so. Thank you for widening the perspective to the European Union dimension. So lastly, I would ask Samir Beharić, or include Samir. Samir, you did your master thesis more or less on your own CV, when I understood it right, when analyzing the influence of foreign scholarship programs on brain circulation especially. Does foreign scholarship contribute to intensify brain drain, or will it stabilize brain circulation? Samir, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Göler, and thank you very much to everyone who spoke before me. I really enjoyed. Well, when we speak about the Western Balkans and Bosnia and Herzegovina in general, like, I live in a country where an individual is considered successful if he or she leaves. And this is also something that is somewhere in people's mindset. And we continuously discuss about brain drain without mentioning brain circulation or brain retention, brain gain. And in this public sphere, there are not enough, I would say, discussions, not just research. I think we should bring the research back into the media, into the general discussions with young people, with their parents especially, because it is our generation, my mom's generation, my parents' generation, who thinks there is no future here for young people in the Western Balkans, and something should change. And that's why also people are pushed in a way to leave the country, and in a way there is this pressure, this push factor from here, and a lot of really strong pull factors from the EU in this particular case, or from the Western Hemisphere. During my MA thesis, I really did this research about young people who currently study abroad. Those are either exchange students or full degree students studying in the EU as scholarship holders of different EU programs. I myself have, during my BA degree, I have spent 3 exchange programs abroad as a scholarship holder of Erasmus Plus program, Turkish government, and my master's studies was completed at 2 universities in the EU as a scholarship holder of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Germany's political foundation. And what I have concluded there from the discussions with my peers is there are 3 groups of people. One group of people, which is from my qualitative research, was the smallest one. Those are those who do not want to return back to Bosnia, for example. And to be honest, this is something that surprised me in a bit, because I didn't think this will be the smallest percentage of those people. They said they're fine abroad. They have met a lot of people there. They like the values abroad. They do not like the values at home here, and they said they do not want to return. Second group of people, which is a bit bigger, are those, for example, who would like to come back, but they do not see the resources back home that could utilize their skills and knowledge. So, for example, I discussed with PhD students of genetics in Norway and in Italy. They said, we would love to come back home. We love our home. We didn't come here to study because we don't like staying home in Bosnia and Herzegovina or in the Western Balkans. However, we do not see what we could do with our skills, with our PhDs back home, because simply there are no resources, there are no institutions that would be able to utilize our knowledge. So this goes back to institutions. When we speak about circular migration, and will foreign scholarship boost circular migration? Yes, it will, if the local government of the region enable those young people to come back and to utilize their skills. And the biggest group of people, they said they want to come back because those are the people who went abroad with a strong motivation to gather the skills, to bring the skills back to the country and to use them here. The problem is, on what we have seen so far on the people who have returned after studying abroad, that they are in a lot of cases not just neglected, but that they are elite, well embedded into the system who work against them, not to come to a place in a position of power that will enable them to endanger those elites who have well-established roots and power relations within the system. And I would say here, when we speak about scholarships and brain circulation, and when we discuss this with politicians, which is every time for me highly disappointing, they say, yo, you know, like it's everywhere. This happens everywhere. Migration of people, you know, people leave everywhere, from Spain, from Italy. That's only partly true. People who leave from Italy and from Spain are usually replaced by other groups of migrants, of immigrants into those countries, in Eastern Europe as well. However, we do not have this group who replaces our migrants, our doctors, our nurses, our highly educated young people that our countries invest in. If we combine all the costs of youth migration from the Western Balkans, yearly cost of youth migration goes to 6.5 billion euros. This is the data by the Belgrade-based Institute for Development and Innovation. And what we need here is a bigger sample, and I will conclude with this. I'm also a board member of the Western Balkans Alumni Association. This is the only regional association organization that gathers young people who have studied abroad as recipients of foreign scholarship programs and decided either to return or to stay abroad. So what we will be doing in the next couple of months, we will be launching a Western Balkans Alumni Association tracer study. This tracer study will be directed at current and former recipients of scholarships provided by the European Commission. And we want to see where are those people, what do they do, what are their connections, what are their plans, do they plan to stay abroad, to come back? If they plan to stay abroad, we want to see what are their intentions. Do they want to continue communicating with their homeland and with their home country? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, young people from the Western Balkans will join the EU with or without the region. My brother has just got his Swedish citizenship 2 days ago. He will never come back to Bosnia and Herzegovina. He will come back only to my mom's place. I'm currently in Jajce, in my hometown, as a tourist. And I think this is something that we need somehow, maybe not prevent, but to utilize in a way for our own benefits here in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank all 5 panelists for the statements. So I'd like to open the floor for the audience. Before we do so, I'd like to start with the instant survey for the audience. The first question is regarding the given situation in the Western Balkan countries. Is return a realistic prospect for young people? You may vote with yes or no, quite easy question. So I will hand over to the co-moderator, Christian Hagemann, just to collect and moderate the Q&A session, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning also from me. We have a couple of comments and questions from the audience and also one raised hand. I will start with the written statements, and there's one question I will read out, which is very interesting and mainly directed to Birgit Glorius. It says, we've heard a lot about how the situation with regard to migration and demography can be turned around in the Balkans with good governance, better standards of living and EU integration, but the experience of Eastern Germany suggests this is not true at all. Since this is a German conference, I'd be interested to hear what the Germans here have to say about what can be learned from your own experience. So this is one question. Then there's more of a comment which says people should profit from best practice examples. Space and opportunity should be offered to returnees in their home countries, places to meet and to keep their foreign languages. And the comment refers to the Spanish example of an organization called Apoya, was founded to help young returnees finding their place at home again and not losing contact to home as well as to the foreign country. And another question goes, in the medical sector, aren't it often also working conditions in the Western Balkan countries which stimulate migration? Why do the governments in the region don't do more to improve these working conditions and in particular fight corruption and create better career opportunities? This is their responsibility in the first place, isn't it? So we have no people from governments here, but probably you can also comment on this one. And finally, I see one raised hand, and this is by Antje Müller, and we can add her directly to give her comment or question. Can you hear us, Antje?
Good morning, everyone. I can hear you very well, but the question is if you can hear me, if you just can give me a short thumbs up or down. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very nice and interesting inputs. I am convinced that we could have a much longer conference talking and discussing every single bit you have mentioned. However, I would like to come back to something which has been stated by Mrs. Glorius right in the beginning, that beneficial return needs to be prepared, which I completely agree. I would like to give you a very short example. So what I'm responsible for the Zoran Djindjic internship program of German business. And what we do is that we give young professionals the opportunity to gain work experiences in Germany in the frame of internships in order to close their gap between theoretical knowledge and hands-on experiences, which is very often missed, in order to increase their employability back in the region. So our program aims at supporting the employability in the region. However, what we have been seeing is that the preparation to return back to the region is a very large one, and it is a very important one. So we have a very large and very active alumni network, which is on a regional basis, and we include our alumni before our new scholarship holders leave to Germany, because we have seen that many young professionals don't even regard their own labor markets as an opportunity, as a possibility to work. There are many reasons which have been discussed during the last couple of days why people would like to leave, or why people have the need or the pressure to leave. So what I have been seeing is that there is a large lack of best practice examples which have been publicly shown and which people are aware of. So our alumni prepare our scholarship holders right from the beginning and show them the opportunities in their own labor market, and show them that having a decent education, having gained experiences also abroad, using mobility can and leads to a good integration back in the original labor market. Of course, and this is like a bracket, there are many frameworks which need to be fulfilled as well. So to make a long story short, or maybe just to add something else before I would like to close my story, is what we also do, and this is something which is very important, is that we do offer many trainings and educational seminars, because the lifelong learning is something which, at least we have the feeling, is not very established in the region. And in order to stay on track with the needs of the labor market, if you just talk about the labor market, it needs to be constantly trained and further educated. So this is what we also do, and our alumni see the benefit of having this this combination. So it's to make a long story short, I don't have a question. I just want to put this on the agenda as well. There are many takeaways of this conference, but for me, one of the most important takeaways is that there is a lack of best practice examples in the region, and there should be, or this is the suggestion, there should be a larger focus on peer-to-peer education when it comes to best practice examples. I think it is specifically when it comes to young professionals, it is important that young professionals speak themselves about their best practice examples, and not parents or teachers or professors or politicians. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Thank you, Antje, for sharing this with us. And I might also point you to the videos we've gathered on our web portal, where also a lot of young people share their experiences, and there are also some of the scholarship holders from the Djindjic program included who talk about this experience. So before I give back to our host, I would just underline that you can still send us your statements, your questions, and you can also still answer the survey that's still going on, which I see not all people have answered yet. So thank you very much for now, and back to Daniel Göler.
So thank you for the interesting questions, the interesting comments. Just to summarize a little bit, the first was addressed directly on Birgit, which would be very interesting to hear something on the Eastern German case, just to find solutions for the Western Balkan countries. Second one was on the Spanish case. The third question is a very, very big topic, especially in these days of COVID-19, the medical sector and the working conditions in the medical sector. which is not that good in Germany, which is very, very bad in most of the Western Balkan countries. And one of the triggers of outmigration of the migrants, especially in the medical sector. And I think very, very important, the comment of Antje Müller on good or best practice examples, just to make clear and to show the benefits of such programs. I think it's very, very important for young people from Western Balkan countries to look at employability and internships abroad, not only in Germany, but as well as in UK or somewhere else. It's a very, very important tool. If we look at employability of young people. Just a comment from my side, we have lots of students groups who come to Bamberg for a couple of days or weeks, and the first thing I include in the program is to visit a company, to visit a professional company in our region and to show how is a workplace in Germany organized, how are the structures behind and so on. I think that is very, very important. But I'll give the floor to Birgit for a comment on the Eastern German perspective, please.
Yeah, thanks to all presenters and thanks to the interesting questions, especially, of course, to this question on the German example, because this is really an interesting showcase, because now we have the only transition situation, I think, in Europe where you have those large gaps in the immediate transition situation, wage gaps, gaps also in terms of living conditions or perceived living quality. And on the other hand, you had very low barriers for immigration. You had no language barrier, you did not apply for a visa or anything. So this, of course, makes the situation totally different. Now we are in year 30 of reunification. And we now see that the migration balance is balanced again. There are even some gains in East German regions by return migration from West Germany. But we indeed had many years of really huge emigration, notably in the first years of all people of working age. And then for years and years after that, especially young people seeking for vocational education or seeking for employment or career steps. And what we saw in the region is, and I think this is really, I think Samir also touched this point, there was a development and a high persistence of an immigration culture. Like really, we still have young people, like especially in small towns in East Germany, where we have research results on that, who have still the perception that it's only beneficial to leave. So those who don't manage to leave are the losers. And this is something that is still also transported by the parent generation. And referring to my Bulgarian project, we had different age cohorts of interviewees. And we saw that this stage is almost over. So that was like during the 1990s and early 2000s that parents, for example, really pushed their children out. But we saw in East Germany that there's really a high persistence of this culture, of this perception that you really need to go. Okay, so now we are in year 30. We see that people are returning. We see that especially smaller towns are in East Germany are trying to install support programs because they need qualified labor force, and they are trying to raise their winning points. For example, still a little bit cheaper living conditions, especially in terms of housing, good conditions for childcare. And indeed, we see it's the young family founding generation who is returning. Like people who went away for their education or for their early career, married, are now in the stage of having children, and now look for opportunities to go back, to install a family life back in East Germany. Also like having the nearness to grandparents, of course. So this is the story of East Germany. And we can see that there are stages of development in this immigration. But what is really interesting is that the perceptions are sometimes more stable than the reality. And we also have to work on the perceptions. Thank you. Somehow our moderator left us, so maybe we just moderate ourselves.
Maybe Alida could touch upon the case of medical workers from Germany,
Hi,
or generally medical workers.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm the operator. So the Wi-Fi connection in Berlin just crashed.
So we are not online now either.
We are online, but we're trying to get our hosts back online.
Okay, I think we can manage ourselves because there are still those questions that need to be answered.
All right, as soon as we're back, I'll get them online.
Perfect.
And we also have 83 people actually can hear us perfectly well, so probably we should pursue this. Samir, you mentioned Germany and health workers. I mean, this is one big issue that that I've been working on. It's really medical stuff in general, and this is not happening in the last year. This is happening continuously because there are different exchange programs with GIZ, but there are also schemes where you can practically, like in any country of the Western Balkans, go to the certain focal point and start your process in order to become certified to work in one of the institutions back in Germany, be it in an elderly home or a hospital or something else. And that really is interesting because it sparked lots of interest back in the region. Now there is a good point about it, and we have seen it elsewhere. If you have people that are motivated to become medical workers and to work in Germany, in reality, certain percentage of them actually doesn't ever go. So they stay as a stock of qualified workers back in the country. So it's not necessarily, it's not per se at all bad. What I was arguing is that we should have some sort of program, and some countries recently have imposed, or not imposed, but suggested a certain establishment of certain funds, basically, places where you can put money in order to engage other doctors to operate in the region and go back and forth. And we have seen these examples. I know personally some people that can't commute between the countries, so they basically earn money and they have their tax bases in one place, but they can also operate elsewhere. And this is what I've been sort of advocating, this portability of benefits, so they can decide where you want to do and what you want to do, because there is no way anyone can be prevented to leave if they really want to leave. It would be an illusion to think that you can stop anyone. I mean, if people are qualified, if they're young, if they're ambitious, there is no way, any sort of policy will stop them. At the same time, as I said, it's really good to have, for smaller countries especially, it's really good to have this circulation, because we ourselves are not on the frontier of technological advancements. We don't have access to all sorts of things that exist out there. So having people coming back and one way or the other infiltrating that knowledge makes all sense in the world. And the last thing, maybe the last point, is it goes back to not necessarily something that we have discussed here, but I think it's really important. The entire region calls for FDI, foreign direct investments, There is another category, which is DDI, the diaspora direct investments. That would make so much more sense actually for the region, because that know-how it has more chances to stay within the region than if you're speaking about FDI only. This is something that policymakers haven't even scratched. And this is what requires strategies, and what I've seen in other experiences, this is really top-down process. This is not, NGOs, universities, clever people gathering and basically trying to sort of figure out how to do it. This is government deciding that this is an important issue, and then they trickle it down, and then they engage all the institutions, from charities to the universities to education centers, whoever. This is how it works. And also one other thing that we kind of overlook here, not all people that want to return are well off. There are many people that simply fail to sort of do anything back somewhere in Germany, somewhere in Austria, somewhere in Sweden, and they need to anchor themselves back. We hardly speak about those people. And this is where the state also should provide, because there are many of those too. I mean, these stories are not necessarily being spelled out, because we prefer hearing about successful people that have left. Many are, you know, not in that position whatsoever. So there are different perspectives on the same kind of theme. I think we have a moderator back.
So Daniel, we just kept on answering the questions.
Yes.
Yes, that's good that you made yourself just to solve the problems for your own. We have some serious technical problems in the studio, so I just grabbed another laptop. So it's the third computer around me, and I just try to fix everything. So I missed now the last 10-15 minutes of the discussion. I think that the round is completed now. Now you should give me a short update. Jelena, please.
Just unmute myself. Thank you. I wanted to say just shortly about the need for integration programs, because it was mentioned a couple of times here. And the integration of migrants after returning, but even before the return to the country of origin, is one of the most important but most demanding processes. It involves not only adapting returnees, but also the local communities they come in and return. However, it requires long-term support, also strategic approach and significant resources because available programs that exist usually cannot meet. And therefore, integration programs are the very important part of the entire migration process. Also, the policy should include measures to reduce the costs and negative effects of migration. Having in mind the focus of our session, among the most significant measures are those to minimize the family disruption caused by the circular migration. And the circular migration on Western Balkans is reality. We must accept it, but it is invisible in statistics, because it lasts less than 12 months, and it is made in informal economy, majority of it. And to make the most of the development benefits, countries of origin should also direct policy toward measures that integrate circular migration into development programs. And effective problem solving requires expanding the migration and related issues to wider plans. It would be very important that development agency at the EU, the origin and destination countries, through joint efforts, integrate migration into their development actions. So the question is how to design useful programs and strategies that support both returnees and local communities to which they return. Is of high importance, but at the same time, it stands as a very huge challenge for policymakers. That's it. Thank you.
So thank you, Jelena. Now the round is completed, I think. The second round on the panel. So at the moment, I'm not too optimistic for the last 25 minutes that we can fix the problem with the technique. So I will go on more or less spontaneously at this point. Looking back on the first question of the online survey, the question was if we can regarding the current situation in the Western Balkan countries, if return is a realistic perspective for young people. And the result was 1/3 who voted with yes, and 2/3 who vote with no, it's not a realistic perspective. So this is more or less how it was to be expected. And this leads me as a kind of maybe provocative thesis for the last round on the panel. I would like to formulate a thesis which may come really a little bit provocative. Isn't it so that the main concern at time cannot be the question how to foster return migration or how to foster even circular migration? Main concern nowadays is to create an environment which is attractive for potential returnees as the first step. I remember the lady yesterday from the company who was questioning or asking the question of the hen and the egg, which has to become at first. So we have to talk about an attractive environment for returnees, or vice versa, is return of young people the key maybe for improvements? Or do we talk about more or less chasing one's own tail or just going around in circles, which would be a very pessimistic perspective at the end of the panel. So I would like to ask you for your comments, maybe 3 minutes. If you keep 3 minutes, we can maybe include the audience by the end of the panel again. So please, maybe let's keep the order. So Birgit, I'd ask you to start.
Well, I mean, that's really the central question of the whole conference, I think. And yeah, it was well already addressed in this first panel on Wednesday without really finding answers. And maybe this just reflects that there cannot be an easy answer because, as we already discussed here in the panel, migration decisions in general are highly individualistic, and you cannot really prevent those decisions. You can rather really try to be transparent about opportunities and to be reflective about constraints. I think also Samir earlier mentioned or was it Alida maybe, who mentioned the hypocrisy of the ruling elites, which might make it difficult for young returnees who are really also early in their career and ambitious to find their place. So I think people have to be reflective about that. Equally important, of course, is, this was also already mentioned, to don't invent those dualisms that only the immigrants are those who are bright and those who stay are somehow backwards. So that there must really be a really high level of reflexivity about those situations. And in terms of beneficial conditions, we have to keep in mind that this is also very individualistic, what you perceive as a beneficial condition, and it also changes over time. So for example, in our Bulgarian return study, we saw returnees who, when they started founding families in Bulgaria and their children reached educational age, they suddenly realized that the educational system in Bulgaria is not what they want for their children. And this can be a high trigger for re-emigrating. So this changes over time, and there is no easy question about that.
So thank you, Birgit. And we can go on with Monica from Bucharest. Please, Monica.
Thank you, Professor Göler. I would like to stress the complexity of the whole issue about circular migration and return migration. Actually, circular migration is definitely beneficial. It is a beneficial process for labor markets and also for migrants themselves, because the knowledge acquired during migration would create human capital that would encourage further movement and the development at origin and sending and the destination countries. Being beneficial, return migration as a part of circular migration should be encouraged by countries with a strong outflows of population, because as we all know, in our countries, in countries like Romania and Balkan countries, there is a severe shortage of labor in many sectors. It was already mentioned, medical sector, but in other sectors with lower skilled labor force, such as construction, we also face labor shortages. Therefore, I would say that return migration should be fostered and should be considered policies for encouraging people to return, at least for specific time periods. In this sense, at least in Romania, we have analyzed the best practices in terms of policies developed for encouraging people to return. In our paper written by myself and my colleague Remus Angel, we emphasize 3 best practices that are put in place with success. The first one is related to medical doctors that are encouraged to return to Romania through various measures. And of course, the most successful one was to increase the salaries. And in the paper, there are reported, it is reported how this measure was implemented. We are not sure at this moment if the return migration will be possible, but at least the outflow of Romanian doctors abroad is at some point discouraged. Another example relates to entrepreneurship. Actually, there are put in place some programs encouraging Romanians living abroad to return to Romania for opening businesses. And significant amounts of money are allotted for such projects, for such programs. For instance, one project may be financed by up to 100,000 euro. In the previous program, the projects were financed up to 30,000 euro, and the program was successful, and a significant number of startups were open, and also a significant number of Romanian living abroad return. So I would just like to emphasize that in the end, decision makers are the one having the key for supporting these processes and for controlling economic imbalances related to labor market shortages and economic development. Thank you. We cannot hear Professor Göler now. We cannot hear you.
We should probably continue self-moderation.
Yeah, so the issue of best practices was also raised by Antje Müller, and I hope this provides a bit of more optimistic perspective on what can be done.
Maybe Birgit can take the moderator's place.
I can try.
Kommt nix. Nein, es kommt nichts.
Now we hear you, Professor.
Until
Okay,
Daniel
So you are very weak, but
now we can hear you.
try
Good.
to listen to you. So the colleagues around me are very, very busy at the moment and just try to fix the problem. So we fixed it a little bit, I think, so that we can finish the last round. Okay, your statement is finished now? Or?
Yes, mine is finished. Yeah, you should.
Yes, okay. It's hard to moderate if you don't hear what people say. So that's the problem at the moment. So please, Jelena, maybe you can end something from your perspective, please.
Thank you. I would like to be an optimist. Encouraging people to return is important. Actually, it would be best and also most difficult to reduce further immigration through systemic reforms. As was underlined, but it is also too much to it's not too much to repeat. It's crucial to establish the rule of law, high quality public services, the high standards of education and healthcare, and above all, the prevention of corruption and supporting independent institutions, judiciary, and investigative journalism as democracy backbones. All Western Balkan countries need to significantly intensify European integration processes. At the same time, these changes would also help to better use their knowledge and skills acquired abroad, returnees, of course. However, as was discussed during the conference, challenges are numerous, such as the lack of economic opportunities, a mismatch between the skills and labor markets needs, distrust in government institutions, problems with recognition of diplomas obtained abroad. Second point I would like to address is related to the temporary and seasonal work programs, which needs more attention also at this conference. A vast majority of these workers are low qualified and do not understand well foreign languages. This is why it is necessary to work devotedly to combat fraud throughout the recruitment process and protect migrant workers against abuse and dependence on the will of agencies and employers. Therefore, it is needed to provide clear and accessible information for all participants in the migration process and to work on expanding the legal channels for international recruitment. And I would stress that this is, in this segment, the good cooperation between countries of origin and destination is crucial. And just one example on the possible measures that can significantly encourage both circular and return migration. It would be beneficial to develop opportunities for portable social welfare benefits, healthcare and life insurance. I addressed it also in the background paper for this conference. And at the end, I just shortly would like to refer to the lack of reliable and internationally comparable migration data. It is a very difficult field. More accurate, comprehensive, and timely, as well as accessible migration data are needed. They're the basis without which neither research nor migration management can be properly advanced. In all Western Balkan countries, it is very important to establish a regular, updated, and synchronized statistical databases monitoring migration flows and its effects on the labor markets. And in order to achieve this, it is necessary to systematically approach the problem in both the origin and destination countries. So I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. So I'd like to give Alida a voice, if you want.
Sure. I think we have opened up several different issues and they can be discussed separately or intertwined. But one is, in my view, we shouldn't be discussing how to bring back people that have left the country only, but make countries attractive for everyone to come in. This is the key point. This is how it works in successful cases. So once you have conditions in place, not only people that have left originally from the country will return, but they will also bring their networks. Once they bring their networks, they will bring their friends, and these friends will bring their friends. And this is something that I've been discussing with Samir separately from this conference. But it's really like going back several stages of your networks in order to bring them back into the country. And once you do that, once you create such conditions, you don't have to worry about, people from Bosnia, Croatia, Montenegro, Serbia coming back. Everyone else will want to arrive to the country. Second thing is, if we discuss these matters, we also have to have in mind that we really know very little about our diaspora. Who do we bring back? How do we reach out to these people? This is a fragmented area. I mean, all these people are all over the place. That there are like several different associations where they're anchored in, but not necessarily, not necessarily all of them are there, and not necessarily all of them are, with the same scope of interest and the skills and qualifications and everything else. I mean, this is something that we haven't even begun. So talking about these things, we have to sort of go back a little bit and try to map up our diasporas in order to know who do we actually refer to, who do we send these messages to. And one important question that goes throughout as a thread throughout this conference is what happens with the government or governments of the region. it's their liability, it's their responsibility to actually fix these things that we keep on talking about: corruption, political bad, poisonous atmosphere, toxic environment, pollution, all sorts of things. I have to say that there are people that are fully aware of this, that are working within the government. They're good people like everywhere else, like in any other company, private sector, NGO. But there seems to, what we lack is this systemic sort of approach to it. There is no strategy. I haven't seen a single really comprehensive strategy that says, this is a big picture. This is, this is the region 10 years from now. If it doesn't go beyond their mandates, it doesn't happen. And once we have this big picture, we can discuss what are the sort of the milestones that we have to cross in order to get there. And until this happens, until, again, I'm going to go back to the top-down approach, until we have a country that is a leader, in this case, that others can follow, we will not see a big sort of a buzz created around it, and it will really come down to these sporadic conferences, I'm afraid. I mean, Serbia has done, to some extent, something. They have opened up some channels with the UNDP. They have created several different platforms that seem to be very, very actually seem to be attractive enough for people like digital nomads. But I think this has to be sort of multiplicated. It has to be replicated in other countries in order to have a full sense. And it's also, I think we should pull ourselves, political elites, with, of course, exceptions that I've already mentioned, that are currently running the region, are the same, more or less the same people that have been running the region in the last several decades. So why would we expect them to change their heart overnight and start thinking about big visions and have become visionary overnight? I don't think this is something that is realistic. It is not realistic for the EU integrations. It is not realistic necessarily for the question on immigration. And this is why we have to really start creating different groups like these in order to sort of come more forcefully into this arena and start discussing this in a competent way. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to give the last voice from the panel to the youngest, to Samir, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really don't know from where to start, but I will try to make 3 short points. So we have also some time for our comment from people who were patient with the technical parts and everything else, and who followed our discussion. So first of all, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are a lot of cases of young people who apply for their 2nd and 3rd masters just because they don't have a job, because they are unemployed. And they can apply for foreign scholarships, and that's how they sustain themselves. This is deeply disappointing and troubling, and this is not sustainable. And in a lot of cases, those young people with 2nd or 3rd masters or even PhD, they go abroad, stay abroad in a lot of cases, and then you will hear Bosnian or generally politicians in the Western Balkans who say, well, yeah, those people are good because they send money. Well, guess what? In a lot of cases, they take even their parents with them, and they do not send even that money anymore. So this is also something that Balkans elites do not consider long term, and this is what Alida has been mentioning. There is this vision of the next 10 or 20 years, how to incorporate and how to use those young people and how to attract them back. Professor Göler, he was mentioning a very good point about internships. In our joint paper, during the last 13 weeks, I was a part of a young team of 12 young people from the Western Balkans who wrote a paper which is available on the platform about how to solve this problem of brain drain, brain circulation, how to integrate people. One of our points is related to joint exchange programs of students and young professionals within the region. This would boost brain circulation within the region of young people, young Serbs, Albanians, Macedonians, Bosniaks, Croats, who will be able to, study at different universities within the region, but not just study, also to go and do an internship or traineeship within the region. We do have successful companies where young people would be interested to gain experience from. Make it like even within Bosnia, it's not possible to study at different universities within Bosnia, within the same country.
It's not possible, you know, to go for an exchange. I cannot do the same within the region. And I think, and we think, the group of young people, one of the recommendations is that the Western Balkan government should work together with the European Commission in establishing such programs. And I will conclude with, I have also read the comment written by Azra Berbic, and I'm glad I'm not the only one. Unfortunately, I'm not the only one who noticed that the first panel, the ministerial panel, where politicians and ministers were speaking, didn't bring anything new, no solutions to the table. And this is something I think that we need to take care of, and this is something that we need to focus on, working with the politicians, trying to push them for more sustainable, concrete solutions in order for our young people, young professionals, people with experience, knowledge, and very important, contacts to come back or utilize their knowledge for the whole region. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Samir, for your statement. I'm completely with you. So when I remember the first day, Wednesday in the afternoon, we started with a trailer of the young people, of voices of young people, and they addressed very, very detailed and very concrete problems they are facing, substantial problems they are facing. And I was really, really disappointed by the answer of the politicians, of most of the politicians, because I heard nothing new. I heard the same things I heard 20, 25 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. This was not a step forward, it was a step backwards, definitely. And yesterday, if I remember right, it was also a statement by one of the politicians who said, my country is badly hit by emigration. My country is badly hit by emigration, but emigration is not an unavoidable natural disaster like an earthquake or a cyclone or something else. It's a consequence of bad governance. It's a consequence of the business environment. It's a consequence of the social system, education system, all the things we talked about yesterday and today, as far as I realized in our panel as well. So I think it's important, just to wrap up in a minute, economy is one point. We have to improve the economy in these countries, in the Western Balkan countries, like it is the case in other parts of the world, to stop emigration. At the moment we have to deal with, we have to live with emigration, because people on the Western Balkans are living from emigration. If we look at remittances in some parts, mostly in the rural peripheral parts, remittances are the safety net for the population, especially for the growing elderly population. That's a fact. But vice versa, remittances are good, but remittances are critical in a point that it is also a citation from yesterday, it made people lazy. It made people not thinking about innovation. Remittances block innovation. So we have to keep this in mind. Business environment is an important point, which was addressed today several times, which will be addressed in the next panel maybe. But economy is not the only point. I think it has to be flanked by improvement of the educational system. This was the voice of the youth in the panel on Wednesday. It was the red line yesterday. I think education system is of the greatest importance if you look not that much on circular migration, but on permanent return migration. Especially in the long term. But to improve educational system, we know it in Germany, it's in the European Union, the same. This is a long-term story. So we cannot say, okay, let's change the educational system and we will gain effects tomorrow or next week or the next year. This is in the long run. So we have to find smaller solutions by now. And one point is internship, for example. Antje Müller mentioned that today in this panel. Another point could be for academics, for example, the idea Ilir Gedeshi formulated that scholars, academics from UK, from Germany, go to Western Balkan countries for some seminaries, for some lectures, just for 1 week, maybe for 1 month or something like that. So this has to be part of the small solutions, and small solutions are good because we can realize them, we can implement them on the short run. So that's my thoughts. By the end of a quite turbulent panel. At the beginning, I was talking about the challenging panel. I was thinking on the time, but not on the IT. We had some IT problems, but this is part of the story if we make online conferences. Thank you for joining the panel. Thanks to the audience, thanks to the panelists for this very good, thoughtful inputs, and I hope you will join us in the next panel, and I wish Michael Martins, the moderator, good luck for that panel. See you soon. Goodbye. Thank you.